Hello, family. Trust you've been great. So, today I'm going to tackle belly fat, visceral fat. But then let me quickly point out that um, I am not an esthetician, right? I will not give you tips at the expense of your health. I do not say that estheticians do that. I am just saying that I am not focused on. It's good to look great, right? I love to look good, but then I am not focused on you just looking good on the outside. My focus is on you being healthy on the inside. So whatever guidelines I give you is not something that will give you results at the expense of your health. So understand that if you're dealing with visceral fat, if you're dealing with big tummy, big belly, and you'd like to knock it down a bit, first of all, let me say that it is possible, but it may not happen the way you expect, meaning that you may not have that flat belly, but then you can actually deal with visceral fat in a way that you improve your overall health and still reasonably improve your appearance and be healthy on the inside as well as look great on the outside, even if you may not necessarily achieve a completely flat belly. So while a lot of people want to lose belly fat just for the outward appearance, belly fat is not just a cosmetic concern. It is a serious health concern. There is a reason why it is called active fat because it does not just sit there like the regular fat you have underneath your skin. Belly fat secretes inflammatory and toxic substances that can actually interfere with your body's hormonal and metabolic processes. This can result in hormonal imbalance, metabolic syndrome, which is something that a lot of people are actually battling with, is a group of conditions that increase your risk of heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, and other complications. Now, from my experience in coaching people over the years, the major drivers of belly fat, visceral fat, are insulin resistance, that is like top on the list. In fact, let me say that the two major ones that is common for most people, insulin resistance, unmanaged stress, and then following quickly is sleep deprivation and a sedentary lifestyle. So, like there are others, but then the four major things I have seen that is actually the problem for a lot of people, that when as soon as they're able to fix those things, they start to see result in terms of dealing with visceral fat. The four major factors involved: insulin resistance, unmanaged stress, inadequate sleep, and a sedentary lifestyle. So one of the easiest way to tell that you have excess visceral fat, besides seeing a protruding tummy, for some people you may actually have a protruding tummy, but for some people you may not have a protruding tummy. It will just be sitting in the internal cavity, like around your organs. So it can be there. You can have excess visceral fat, but then not have a protruding tummy. Your stomach will still appear flat on the outside, but then the excess fat is settled around your organs. So one of the easiest way to tell whether you have protruding tummy or not, one of the easiest way to tell if you have excess visceral fat, besides having a protruding tummy, is the measurement around your waist circumference. If your waist circumference measures above, that's around your navel. If it measures above 40 inches for a man and above, say, 35 inches for a woman, you should definitely start doing something about it immediately. If you want to tackle visceral fat, you already know that you have to tackle those four factors I talked about earlier. I'm going to talk a bit on all of them, but then I'll also leave the links of where I extensively talked about them in the previous podcast. I'm going to leave the links on under the description of this podcast so that it's easy for you to also refer to them. But then I'm going to talk a little on how to, tackle those areas. Insulin, I will always say that I will always hammer on that because it's been scientifically proven as the truth. Insulin is the major driver of fat storage. Now, when you eat carbohydrate, the body breaks it down into glucose, blood sugar, and insulin is released to give access to your cells to pull up the glucose from your bloodstream to begin to supply energy to the cells, to the parts of your body that needs energy. Now, when that is going on, insulin immediately puts a pause on burning stored fat and begins to use up the energy from or gives access to your cells to take up energy from your bloodstream. Now, here's the thing, if you still don't have, you eat a meal, for instance, and you don't have immediate need for energy, insulin will also take the glucose from your current meal that you just had and go and still store it. So it does not just put a pause on burning fat, it also stores the fat, the excess from the meal that you've just had. Do you understand? So when insulin levels are up, it's not an optimal state for fat burning. While it's important because it helps to keep your bloodstream clean from all of the fluctuations in blood sugar from your meal, it is not an optimal state for fat burning. And that is why your body is not meant to be in that state long term. So, do you understand how it can be for somebody who has insulin resistance? It means that your body is perpetually on fat storage mode. That is why people who have insulin resistance finds it very difficult to burn fat. Rather, it's like every meal you eat goes into fat storage and you start accumulating all of this excess fat around your belly. And this is a very common situation for a lot of people because a higher percentage of people have insulin resistance from constantly consuming carbohydrate meals around the clock. Carbohydrate is an energy giving food. It is meant to give you energy and it has a fixed amount that your body requires in a day. But the higher percentage of people are not eating that exact amount that the body requires. They are going way above the max, way above what the body requires. So they are constantly having excess spillovers going into fat storage. And then when these constant fluctuations in blood sugar goes on, you become insulin resistant. And all of that excess fat starts to settle around your belly. Now, chronic stress, where chronic stress also contributes to make that situation even worse, is that chronic stress also affects how your hormones function. Chronic stress destabilizes your hormones. So you have excess cortisol slowing down your metabolism, making you have unhealthy cravings, unnecessary cravings, while also making insulin resistance worse. And then throw in sleep deprivation into the mix, and that is a recipe for disaster because one night of poor sleep alone can negatively impact your insulin sensitivity. So imagine having, in fact, for a lot of people, poor sleep is the reason why they cannot lose belly fat and the reason why they cannot even lose fat overall, because just a night of poor sleep can affect your insulin sensitivity the next day. So imagine if you're constantly having poor sleep night after night. To add to that, a sedentary lifestyle, a sedentary body is a fat storing machine. When you are a couch potato, your body is just constantly on fat storage mode. The body was made for movement. One of the best ways to improve insulin sensitivity is by movement, by activating your muscles. When you're constantly moving, that improves your metabolism, that improves how much calories your body is able to burn because you're constantly using up energy. That also improves insulin sensitivity. If you want to burn belly fat easily, I am not saying if you want to have a flat belly like that of a model, but then if you want to get rid of unhealthy visceral fat, number one, reverse insulin resistance. To do that, It's actually very easy. Reduce the amount of carbohydrates you take to a large extent. At least a carb meal or two a day, especially taken at the earlier hours of the day when you're still expending energy, is okay. Typically, for dinner, especially if you're trying to reverse visceral fat, for dinner, I do not recommend taking carbohydrate meals at all because at that point, you do not require energy. Insulin sensitivity is typically very low at dinner time because at that time your body is winding up for sleep. So it's not expecting you to bring in a lot of energy, processing of food, and all of that. So my recommendation at that time is if you happen to, you must eat when it's say past 7 p.m. Even if it's 7 p.m., if you let your dinner, especially when you know that after your dinner you don't have much activity, it's just to wind down for the day and then turn in and sleep, your dinner should be mainly animal protein. And I'll talk on another podcast on why animal protein is very optimal for burning belly fat and burning fat generally. But then let your dinner be built majorly around animal protein and, of course, vegetables. So mind your carb portions. Restrict the number of times you consume food that causes a raise in blood sugar to at least not more than two a day. Of course, start prioritizing sleep, having at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep every night. Manage stress and then move your body more. I would, like I said, I'm going to drop the links of the where I talk extensively on some of these areas that I've mentioned so that you can also listen to add to what I've talked about here. I also highly recommend that anytime you have a carb meal, take a walk at least 10 minutes or 5 minutes if that's what you can fit in. It helps to just you know suck up the glucose from your blood and helps to put it into work, to channel them into the muscles, to put them into work immediately rather than them going into storage. And of course, build your meals on healthy food. That's very important. Real food that you can prepare by yourself in your kitchen and you can guarantee the ingredients that the food is made of, not the one that comes in a package that you do not even understand the ingredients in them. Okay, so talk to you soon.